Hello everyone, friends. My name is Denys Galanzovsky. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting and important topic that was raised by a sociologist. He emphasizes that the continued merging of the armed forces of Ukraine and the territorial recruitment centers is more likely to destroy trust in the entire army rather than, let's say, build trust in the territorial recruitment centers. For one simple reason: because no real punishments are applied to the employees of the territorial recruitment centers. The information is presented entirely one-sidedly. And at the same time, even though from September 1st, the territorial recruitment center employees were supposed to wear body cameras, this is not happening. And even in those controversial situations, in those bloody situations when either illegal forced detention is carried out, or when territorial recruitment center employees are on the other side. There was a case in Lviv where he was killed. There is no footage from body cameras at all. Why is there none? Everyone avoids answering these questions, and I think you can draw your own conclusions right away. And now let's listen to this sociologist. This is Andriy Yermenko.
If people see territorial recruitment centers as part of the armed forces of Ukraine, they're more likely to dislike the armed forces than to warm up to the centers. So let's keep them separate, let them remain different. The problem is these current practices aren't working. We need to return to the law. If the military commissariat starts working according to the law, then we'll have far fewer negative stories. But here's the thing. The military commissariat is being pressured. They're given a quota. The commission goes through Shvika. Well, when we know the units, like you read about Shvika, all sorts of people. Shvika, what? Shvaiko, well, at baptism, it was somehow Shvika Chapik. Yeah, I read it in Russian, so I don't know how to say it correctly in Ukrainian. And the same thing happens here when people come and turn themselves in.
Let me remind you that we have a regulation at the Commission. At the VLK, it's 10 minutes per person. If you look at their regulations, you can examine no more than 50, let's say, conscripts in a day. That comes out to about 10 minutes per person. Is it possible to conduct the VLK in an adequate format in 10 minutes? Obviously not. And that's exactly why there are cases when sick people are mobilized, when people with disabilities are mobilized, when those who shouldn't be mobilized are mobilized. And then after that, well, all this burden then falls on the shoulders of the military units, who receive sick people who are then discharged. And at the same time, there is no responsibility at all, neither for those MLCs that make these decisions, nor for the TCC. There is simply no responsibility, that's all. So here is the one and only question. Are they really working to strengthen our defense capability and for Ukraine's victory? Draw your own conclusions.
Some of them are just pushed through to meet the quota. Then the units don't know what to do with this person, who will fall apart the next day. The person is hospitalized. What treatment do they receive? Which medical commission handles it? Well, really, it should be done properly so that a psychiatrist examines them and doesn't send someone with schizophrenia, and they check their physical condition so that a person who can't walk doesn't get classified as fit for service. And while these things do happen, contract matters are very positive. The main thing that discourages people from joining is uncertainty and the unknown. I got caught and don't know what will happen. But if you show someone the plan, like you'll go through this and that, and they'll show them a map of where they'll be going, they'll show them that there's almost no chance of ending up in a meat grinder unit.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, like he said, you have no chance of ending up in a meat grinder unit. This can only mean that meat grinder units do exist, and that people end up in them, including Ukrainians. That's all. At this point, you could wrap up the whole story, finish it, and have an answer to the question of why people don't want to go, right? And when people on the internet are always saying that it's better to go yourself, choose your own unit, and so on, it all comes down to the fact that when people are caught, they don't want to go there. They'll either buy their way out or they'll run away and so on. Why? Because we see that no one is saying, well, to be precise, no one is denying that there are crappy units, there are meat grinder units, and there's a chance you could end up there. That's why people, when they give some money or when they run away, people are probably just trying to save their own lives. That's kind of how it looks. Share your thoughts in the comments, then we'll continue. Ukrainians, in fact, will be told that everyone needs to go fight, that they need to go as soon as possible, that they need to donate, and so on. And you need to kind of stay silent, right, when some problems arise. But an investigation by Novius Skimmy revealed that the son of the former Minister of Justice and Energy, who appeared on the Mindich tapes, is part of a massive corruption scheme. His son studies at a Swiss college for $200,000 a year. 18-year-old Maxim Halushchenko, the son of former Minister of Justice and Energy Herman Halushchenko, studies at a private Swiss college. This is among Europe's most expensive colleges, with tuition and accommodation totaling around $200,000 annually. According to journalists' estimates, 4 years of study could have cost the family nearly $700,000 or 26 million hryvnias, which is several times higher than Halushchenko's official income and declared savings. There is no mention of expenses for his son's education in his declaration. Can we already put an end to this whole story with mobilization, with what you need to do, whether you need to take your children out or not? Everything seems clear here. Lawyer Halushchenko stated that the expenses are handled by his ex-wife and that the tuition amount is lower, but he did not provide any evidence. At the same time, the college's website lists a fixed cost and no discounts or scholarships are provided. You know, this is just another case where someone was caught red-handed and there's no way to even talk their way out of it. That's the story. Moving on, another interesting point. 51% of Ukrainians save on food to buy medicine, and the vast majority of them are pensioners. Katerina Zahori, director at Darnitsia, said 94% of Ukrainians have noticed higher medicine prices. The next point is also very interesting, but let's take a look at it. Look, now we will go over the new changes announced by the Inspection Activity Department regarding how to further restrict men because of their refusal to come to the Territorial Recruitment Center. And then, probably the most interesting part of this episode, political scientist Oles Doni will explain how real resources for replenishing the armed forces of Ukraine can be found within Ukraine's security structures. This has been discussed for a long time. What did the Inspection Activity Department announce? Men may not be hired if they are not registered with the Territorial Recruitment Center. First of all, when hiring or enrolling all conscripts and reservists, the employer is required to check if they have the appropriate documents. Reservists need a military identification or temporary certificate. Conscripts require a registration certificate from the draft office. Such individuals can only be hired after they have been registered for military service at the Territorial Recruitment Center. Women with medical or pharmaceutical education are also reservists and must provide a military registration document when getting a job, even if the role isn't related to their field. Otherwise, this company can be fined. That's the story. You know, do you know what this means? This only means that even more people will work off the books and not pay taxes. That's basically all you need to understand. Now, let's get back to our political scientist, who will now show some blind individuals where to find a prepared and motivated mobilization resource.
The largest pool of personnel for the army is in the army itself. In the army, meaning we have a huge number of military personnel, the size of the armies is not actually decreasing. There is a problem at the front, but it's not about the number of troops. We need to look at it really. A huge number of positions are needed for the rear. They talk about the Mukachevo and Kyiv pockets the most, meaning we have a problem with the military in Pokrovsk. But the Mukachevo and Kyiv pockets are full of army personnel. So it's not just government structures that are swelling, army structures are swelling too. If it's a deputy, it's also a deputy. Mariana Bezugla said that there are only up to 100,000 military personnel in the TCC. Is that true? Did Lazutkin say that to Karmi? 36,000 excluding security companies means tens of thousands of military personnel who could all be replaced by civilians. We have border services that protect European countries.
It's an interesting point, but we're told that only those who've already been to the front work at our territorial recruitment centers, especially in security companies. We also know this isn't true. There are also many signals about this, including from members of the Ukrainian parliament who also say that this is not true. And from the videos that are actually online, it's also not very clear that those who work in the security companies, meaning those who actually catch people, throw them into vans and take them to the military enlistment office, which, I remind you, is absolutely illegal. They don't look like people who have any health problems. On the contrary, they look like pretty strong, tough men who are trained to harm other people.
Some Ukrainians who don't want to serve still stand armed at the border, numbering tens of thousands of men. There's a different approach to officers who are told that positions can't be found for them, meaning regular positions, like during wartime for those aged 17 to 27. So the third is army reform. In this way, it's possible to find several 100,000 men. This is already happening, but foreign recruitment must be stronger. It's unfair that fascist Russia recruits more abroad than Ukraine.
We've already talked about this with you 150 times, about why Russia can develop foreign recruitment, but in Ukraine it's not done in a centralized way. Only certain units do this. When they come to us, they recruit volunteers with combat experience from Colombia and other countries. They come here, serve in these units, and everything is fine with them. Why isn't this developing? Why aren't the relevant initiatives supported, and why isn't funding allocated for this? It's unclear. Yes, because of course it would be much better if, let's say, on some of the hottest fronts, it wasn't Ukrainian citizens in the ranks, but rather mercenaries who would do the dirtiest work. Yes, I think that would be logical, and if you look at it, it doesn't cost that much, because it's exactly the same in Ukraine. To join the military, to go to war for the same $2,500, $3,000, that's exactly the same money Ukrainians get, only here. In this case, for example, if such a person dies, there's no need to pay out 15 million hryvnias, and if the person is wounded, they need to be treated. Well, it depends on the contract and so on, but in general, I think the logic is clear. But at the same time, we see that there are no funds for foreign recruiting. But we do have 2 billion for the telethon. That's what you need to understand. Or we have 15 billion for Zelensky's Winter 1000. What do you think if this money were used for the development of international recruiting? Would it change the situation in Ukraine? Would military enlistment officers need to catch fewer people then? Most likely, yes. And then the attitude towards the military enlistment officers would also change, because they would start following the law again, instead of playing by their own rules and demanding legality from people.
This 1,823 contract was signed for 1,000 hryvnias. I'm also talking about foreign recruitment, because Ukraine's demographic resources will never be enough compared to the larger population of fascist Russia. We need to strengthen foreign recruitment. Ukrainians should mainly be officers, while rank-and-file soldiers should come from abroad. And only the fourth point is mobilization with a different approach. Right now, people are being mobilized on the streets, but we need to mobilize two categories of citizens. The first is law enforcement agencies, which are currently not subject to mobilization. Hundreds of thousands have been trained by the Ukrainian state to handle weapons and are not afraid of them, unlike those being grabbed on the streets. That is to gradually rotate them, including the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Security Service of Ukraine. The first group is security forces. The second is government officials, who still aren't being mobilized. These are people who receive benefits from the state unlike everyone else. Recruiting exclusively, in other words, nothing. Farmers, builders who are not dependent on the state, not recruiting on a voluntary basis. And mobilization means those who receive benefits from the state, like law enforcement and government employees. But this is a change in the approach to mobilization. And the deputy who was quoted believes that it's simply necessary to increase the number of patrols on the streets and catch more people. There will be more draft dodgers and desertion.
And there will be more of these crappy cases when people die. That's the worst thing, which can also get worse. And we see that this story is somehow unfolding, and it actually becomes really scary because of that. That's our story. Friends, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Wishing everyone a good evening. See you next time.